Lune de Sang is French for blood moon. The night before we exchanged contracts, there was a blood moon eclipse. We were beginners about farming. We knew nothing and decided to embrace the omen by naming the property Lune de Sang.
We started planting the forest right away before we built any structure at all. And so we needed a shed. We needed an equipment shed to put all of our rolling gear in. And building epic sheds may not be to everybody's taste, but I think a building can be beautiful. It doesn't matter whether it's a shed or a barn or a church or a house. There's still an imperative to make what you're doing something that you stand back and take a lot of pride in. Not just for the building itself, but the way it melds with the landscape. And that's an interesting one too, because melding with the landscape, this landscape is changing all the time. So the way you build and the way you have to build is an anticipation of how this thing is going to look in 20 years' time and in 50 years' time. Sort of you build these things so the landscape grows into it.
Shed 1 was the first building we built, and there was a lot of talk about it lasting forever. The forest taking the building over, what would that look like? I mean, I always imagined it with global warming, perhaps underwater, and corals growing on it. I mean, we've really tried to imagine the whole place in lots of different contexts. And I believe there is a mystical energy of the forest. We weren't going to live here. We had a little cabin where we'd come every fortnight and talk to the planters. But the energy in the forest actually really wants to come back. And the forest seemed to almost grow this project in spite of us. And soon neighboring properties became for sale, and we bought them and we started planting it there. So I actually think the forest energy has had a huge amount to do with the property. We have 10 properties now that we've put together, about 350 acres.
I'm not exactly sure how many trees we planted, but it's well over 120,000 trees. And things grow so quickly here because of the climate and the rainfall and the soil type that you're able to actually see results pretty quickly, and that's very gratifying. And we built some pretty big buildings around this place, and it's become kind of my heart's home.
I think the architect was very sensitive in creating buildings that fit in with the forest. The architect that we eventually landed with, John Choi at Crawfey, is probably a real genius about precinct. So I think John doesn't just think about a building, he really works at the context the building is in and marrying the two. And John was very good at all of the buildings being sculptures in the forest that enhance the forest, that don't compete with it, that are part of the forest. It grew bit by bit, and the next door farm came up for sale. And suddenly then there was space for Shed 2, so that as we grew, as the farm grew, the project grew, and the idea of the project grew and what it could be. It's been very organic, actually.